Why were Parsi men and women having so many illegitimate children?
My son Jahan, he got a message from a Chinese girl saying she is his second cousin.
There is so much we don't know about our own ancestry, about our own forefathers.
So we're here to discuss your book, Who is a Parsi? It's an interesting title, it's a thought-provoking title, it's a very relevant title, I think. So what was the inspiration behind the book and of course the title?
We the Parsis have been part of India for centuries, but there's no definition of who is a Parsi. So I decided to look into this matter. There are some studies on the community, but there is no study on the rights and privileges of women. And many women have been deprived of their rights on the basis of some folklore, hearsay, or just half-truths. I studied many law cases, but I am not being a lawyer myself. I requested Mr. Fari Nariman to help me in getting all the facts together. Mr. Nariman himself has written the foreword of the book, and he has given the constitutional way forward.
So you mentioned that he's played a fairly significant role in helping you write this book. So how exactly, how did he help you? What was the role that he played?
I did not know Mr. Nariman, but as I told you, when I got all these facts together, I sent him my manuscript, just like that. And at first he didn't answer. I didn't realize he was not well. But later on, he told me to send the manuscript to him again. And this time, he printed out the manuscript. He corrected it by hand. He removed what he thought was wrong, and he added what he thought was right. He has written 5 chapters in this book, and he has also added some judgments which he thought were relevant.
And was there anything that he added that you had not come across in the past? Something that was an eye-opener for you in any way?
Yes, he added the chapter on adoption, which I had not thought about at all, because he said that adoption itself is not within Parsi law, but he said Parsis can adopt under the Guardians and Ward Act.
So you mentioned discrimination in your first opening comment. So in your opinion, how would you describe the discrimination that you faced or that others are facing?
My daughter is married to a non-Parsi, a non-Zoroastrian, but they had decided from the beginning that they would bring their children up in the Zoroastrian faith. And accordingly, once they were born, we were taking them to the fire temple, until one day we were told not to. So on inquiring why, I was told the trust deed is sacrosanct. I had not read the trust deed, so I decided to get a copy and read it. There I saw we are supposed to follow the Bhuga Sarat priests of Navsari and Dastur Kekobad, Adarbar, Dastur Noshirwan in the observance of our rites and religious ceremonies.
You mentioned a court judgment in your book, Saklat versus Bela, that hasn't been published before. So why do you feel this is particularly important, and how do you think it will change the perception of who is a Parsi?
In my book, I published this particular judgment which Mitra Sharafi got from the Privy Council. It is the full manuscript of Saklat versus Bela. It is about a 1,000-page judgment, and it contains the cross-examination of 3 of our high priests in India at that time. Parsis don't know that it was the high priest of India, Dastur Kekobad, Adarbar Dastur Noshevan, who was also the head priest of our Calcutta fire temple, who went from Calcutta, where he was at that time, to Rangoon to do Bela's Navjot. And it was Dastur Kekashur Jamaspi, head priest of the Bhugasarat sect, who also we are supposed to follow in Calcutta, who went to do Ratan Tata's wedding to Suzanne Bread. Suzanne was a French Christian lady. He first converted her to a Parsi and then married her to Ratan Tata under the Parsi Marriage and Divorce Act, where only a Parsi can marry a Parsi.
So Parsis are typically depicted as a very affluent community. Your book seems to suggest otherwise. So why do you feel so?
Well, we came as refugees and we mixed with the poorest of the poor. They were called the Dubras. And in fact, our language which we speak is a mixture of Persian and Dubra Gujarati. When we came, we stayed here for many years and we had completely forgotten our religion. We stayed as a tribe amongst the Hindus, following their religion and their customs, until one Changa Asha found us around the end of the around 1600. And what he did is that he gave us our Sadra and Kasti and he retaught us our religion. And because we were not familiar with so he sent priests from India to Persia with questions to bring back answers. And this system was called the Riots, and they went on for a period of 300 years. Now we keep saying Parsis are an affluent community, but you'll see in my book there's a chapter on the Parsi riots. Now at that time there were 3 riots. One was the dog riots, one was the riots because of the picture of Muhammad which had been splattered with ink on his eye, and the third was a riot also because of the British had taken away all the dogs from the Parsi houses, and so the Parsis revolted against it. About 5,000 Parsis went onto the street to fight, and there was a big tamasha, and the Parsis at that time were supplying the bread to the British army, so they stopped that supply and they prevented the merchants from supplying meat also, and they took a dead goose and threw it into the Governor General's car. Then afterwards, when the whole thing subsided and the arrests were made, then 2 prominent members of the Parsi community went in an open car down the road and to show that they were not in agreement with this lower caste of Parsis who had caused the trouble. So at that time there was a clear distinction between the upper caste and the lower caste.
So you mentioned that during your research you found that we had forgotten our religion over a few centuries and then had to sort of relearn it and were retaught it. So firstly, what aspects of the original Zoroastrian religion do you think we still follow? And secondly, do we have any sort of law that we tend to ascribe to or follow?
Our original religion is there in our gathas. These are supposed to be the actual words of Zarathustra. There are 5 gathas which describe our religion as a monotheistic religion. We believe in one God, which made a religion for all mankind. In fact, in our daily prayers, every day we say, we will spread our religion to the 7 regions of the world. Now, the next part of your question, which is, did we have any personal law of our own? Obviously, we never had, because we had forgotten where we had come from and who we were. But in the 1800s, we were governed by a panchayat, that is a group of 5 people. And the method of punishment was beating with the shoe. And they got official permission from the British to perform this punishment. Then occasionally they would issue bandobast, that is, this was an arrangement to be followed. And the bandobast of 1830 is published in the book, and it says that Parsi men and women were having affairs with Parsis and people of other communities, and all children born of these affairs were being accepted into the community. The Parsi Panchayat tried to stop it but did not succeed.
So this leads me to my next question, which is, why were Parsi men and women having so many illegitimate children?
The answer is threefold. First and foremost, in the Parsi community, child marriage became a norm. So children were being married away at the age of 3 and 4. And when they grew older, they found they were not compatible. And so they drifted apart, because divorce was a very expensive procedure and took a long time. And they had affairs and they lived together with other people. And all these children were accepted into the community and into the religion. The second point is that prostitution was a legal profession in that time. The census of Bombay in 1841 says that there were 41 Parsi prostitutes registered. And all children born of Parsi prostitutes have been accepted into the community and the religion. Now, thirdly, it was the way of life at that time. We know that Parsis are wealthy, but how did they get that wealth? They got that wealth at the expense of their personal life. They had to leave their families here and go abroad to earn. Sometimes they would sign a contract saying that they wouldn't return that they would stay there for 7 years. Now, if they made 4 journeys, then 28 years of their lives, they were out of India. And more often than not, they had a second family in the other place. In fact, my husband's great-grandfather had a Chinese wife. And when he fell sick, she came down to look after him. And she stayed here for 3 years, much to the disgust of his Parsi wife. Then when she passed away, she packed her bags and left. We have done our DNA analysis at 23andMe, and this gives us our DNA relatives. And my son Jahan, he got a message from a Chinese girl saying she is his second cousin.
There is so much we don't know about our own ancestry, about our own forefathers. My family has an 800-year-old family tree. And we found to our surprise that we were not called Mehtas always. In the beginning, we were called Talati. And I think the first 300 years are a very bare sort of family tree. But then suddenly we come across two very illustrious names, which are the start of our ancestry, as it were. Some 500 years ago, there were two gentlemen who had very Parsi sounding names. One was Ramji and the other was Bhaiji. Now, how on earth can you have Ramji and Bhaiji being Persians? Obviously, they were adopted or adopted boys. But that is the beginning from where the Mehtas started to establish themselves as being a cut above the rest. So these two names are extremely illustrious. At that time, there was a big quarrel between different factions in which Ramji had played a very big role in getting the two together. Now, take the example of my wife Prochy. Her grandfather, Jilla, very good, very strong, solid name in Calcutta. Then we came across the wedding invitation of the grandfather, and we found to our surprise that he was an adopted boy. He was adopted by some other family. What is that? Adopted by the Sadris, Vancouverji. So, when we don't know that much about even 2 generations ago, and yet we take great pride in saying, no, ours is the original race of 1200 years ago, we came down by one boatload. We never came down by one boatload. We came down across hundreds of years into this country. We've been here 500 BC by traders. We are perhaps the original settlers of India and came more, I think we can lay more claim to being original settlers in India than even the Muslims or the Hindus. Because we came in peace, we came as traders, not as conquerors. We didn't fight anybody. So there was a point that was made some years ago, but I think that point has died a natural death. We won't claim to be the original citizens of India, but we've been here for a very long time, definitely more than 1200 years, as is popularly known.
So we seem to have gone from a free-for-all in the 1800s, based on what you said, where anything was allowed, almost, to extreme orthodoxy, and now we seem, as a community, to be aligning towards patriarchy. Seem to be, as a, like I said, as common practice. Why do you think that how do you think that change has happened, firstly? How has your research shown that we have moved in this direction? And why do you feel we are where we are today?
Well, the laws of the land have changed. And the Special Marriage Act seems to have created a lot of the confusion. In 1865, we had the first Parsi Marriage and Divorce Act. Under this act, only a Parsi could marry a Parsi. And all personal laws had that. A Muslim would marry a Muslim, Christian would marry a Christian. There was no intermarriage. Then 1872 was the first Special Marriage Act. Under this act, 2 people of 2 different faiths could marry, but they would have to sign a declaration saying they are giving up their faith. So now at this stage, that a Parsi could marry a Parsi, or he could marry a person of another faith under the Special Marriage Act by giving up his religion. Or they could convert to each other. For example, Rati Petit converted to the Muslim religion and married Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And Suzanne Bray, a French Christian lady, converted to the Parsi religion and married Ratan Tata. So these were the 3 options. Now, in 1954, there was a new Special Marriage Act. And this one, you were allowed to maintain your religion. So now you have the 4th option. And this people do not know. And they still believe what their grandfathers and fathers have told them, that if you married out of the religion, you have left the religion. But now you can maintain your religion if you marry under the Special Marriage Act. In fact, Indira Gandhi married Firoz Gandhi, and they followed Indira's religion. They did not follow Firoz. It's not a patriarchal system. They followed Indira's religion. And when Maneka Gandhi's husband passed away, Sanjay passed away, she went to court saying that Sanjay is a Parsi because he's born of a Parsi father. He's a Parsi and she wanted the inheritance under Parsi rights. But the court judged against her. She said that the children's Navjot has not been done. They are not Parsis, they are not Zoroastrians. Now, there's another factor in this also, which is the Parsi Marriage and Divorce Act of 1936. Under this act, a Parsi can marry a Parsi, but a Parsi has been defined under this act. A Parsi is a Parsi Zoroastrian under this act. It doesn't say caste, doesn't say race, nothing. Only that it's a Zoroastrian, and you can cease to be a Parsi by converting to another religion. So the 1936 Act is quite different.
My own take on this is a little different. The way I viewed it is that Indians, Parsis being Indians, were thoroughly assimilated into the population over here. And we started following a lot of the Hindu customs, which I guess is inevitable after a period of more than 1,000 years. To that extent, we got involved in child marriage, and we started investing our children at a younger and younger age. Earlier in Iran, it would be at the age of maturity, when you could understand the religion. Then you were given the Navjot ceremony. But over here, we started doing it at a much earlier age, sometimes at the age of 5 or 7, to bring the children into the religion. Then we also adopted child marriage. These are some of the things that we adopted by being part and parcel of the population of India. At that time, India was highly paternalistic, patriarchy was rampant. So we started following those practices too. However, the original society that we had absolute equality between men and women. In fact, earlier, when the Parsi man was not available for a village meeting, his wife would attend in his place and command the same respect and command the same authority as the man would. We've had several ladies, some of them commanders in the army and in the navy, who have led us into war very successfully. So for us, equality was a given. This started to change subsequently. Now, when I was reading about the cross-questioning of the priests, it struck me, why were the priests trying to become lawyers? But they had to understand law because they were being questioned by the Setiyas who were trying now to displace the priests and control the community. In this, they were urged on by the British, who played a very quiet role in trying to set up the Setiyas to control the community. What better way to control it than to set up fire temples which were controlled by private trusts owned by the Setiyas? Now the British had the Setiyas completely within the palm of their hands because they were making their money through licenses given for trade, the opium trade with Hong Kong or any other business that they were doing. So they could control the Setiyas, and they wanted the Setiyas to influence the religion. This became apparent when Parsis were rioting earlier, and they exerted influence on the Setiyas to have the Parsi riots stopped, and they were going against the Parsi businessmen, who went at great pains to explain that we have nothing to do with the riots and we'll do our best to calm it down, which they did. So in this, the British helped them by setting up what is known as public charitable trusts. But in England, a public charitable trust for a temple of such nature has to have regular trustee elections. Over here, they allowed the trust to be run privately. So they had a public trust which was privately owned and privately run. Very often, the trustee would pass on the mantle of trustee to his son or to the next generation. So it was like a coterie holding the entire community to ransom by taking charge of the place of worship. This is how they exerted influence. And I think this has a lot to do with the misunderstandings that have taken place in the last 100 or 150 years since the Setiyas came into great wealth.
These two words, Parsi and Zoroastrian, I think there's a fair amount of confusion in our community as to what exactly each of them means. Sometimes they're used interchangeably, often they're considered as totally distinct. So what in your opinion is a Parsi? What's a Zoroastrian? What's the difference? What's the connection?
Though there is so much debate in our small community about the words Parsi and Zoroastrian, the fact is that the word Zoroastrianism itself was only coined in 1874 by Sir Archibald Henry Sayce. Before that, it was called the Parsi religion, or the Dena religion, or the Good religion, or the Mazda Yasni religion. The word Zoroastrian wasn't there.
Parsi and Zoroastrian are a tautology, which is to say that they mean one and the same thing. The word Zoroastrian, as explained, came much later in 1870 or so. But the word Parsi has been coming down through history. We have come from a region of Pars, which is at that time, which is the whole of Iran today. So coming from Pars, we were known as Parsik or Parsis or ultimately Parsi.
So we've talked a lot about certain landmark cases that are sometimes quoted, misquoted, used, misused. So can you talk about these two landmark cases that you feel are pivotal in determining who is a Parsi?
There were two cases. One was in 1905 and another in 1915. One is what Mr. Fali Nariman calls the Sunnu Tata case, and the other is the Bella case. In both these cases, it was the head priest of the community who performed the religious ceremonies. That is of the Navjot ceremony of Bella and the Navjot of Susan Bray and her wedding to Ratan Tata. The judges, while confirming that conversion is a tenet of the religion, in the judgment they have confirmed, and that the child of a Parsi mother and a non-Parsi father is entitled to be initiated into the religion. At the same time, they try to make a distinction between Parsi and Zoroastrian. One saying that the word Parsi means race, and the other saying that Parsi means caste. Now, this was in 1905 and 1915. But in 1936, we have our own personal law, the new Parsi Marriage and Divorce Act, which does not mention race or caste. It simply defines Parsi as Parsi Zoroastrian. So I think those two cases are not relevant at all to our community today.
I'm going to go back to Mr. Fali Nariman for a while. And he's written the foreword to the book, he's written some chapters as you said, but he has given some advice in the foreword. So can you summarize that for us?
Mr. Nariman has written the foreword in this book, and he has mentioned that the Constitution of India has conferred a separate fundamental right on all individuals who practice religion, irrespective of race or caste. He says race and caste has no place in the Constitution of India today. It has been replaced by religion. Mr. Fali Nariman is India's foremost constitutional lawyer, and he has given his personal view on the position of intermarried women and their children under the Constitution of India today, and he has given the constitutional remedy available to enforce it. Now, more than 50% of our marriages are interfaith in India today. And we are practically losing our female line. I think we should encourage our girls to keep their religion and bring their children up in our faith.
So, Noomi uncle, I have a question for you. There seems to be a clash today, and it's not just restricted to our community, I think it's all around the world. There's a clash between fact and knowledge on one hand, and belief on the other. And whether we agree or disagree, both are equally powerful, right? Certain people believe that their beliefs are more important. What's been handed down to them is more important than what fact might state or what history might state. Others might say that knowledge is paramount, right? Let's not worry about a belief that was changed a few years ago or a century ago. Let's go by fact and knowledge. The further issue is that we seem to be, and the world seems to be sort of heading apart, right? The lines are not even parallel, they're heading apart, and knowledge is going one way and belief is going the other way. Right wing is going one way, left wing is going the other way. One political party goes one way, the other political party goes the other way, and they don't seem to be coming together. For our survival, as you mentioned, for our survival, we possibly do need to come together, and for our general well-being and happiness, we do need to come together. How do you think we can do that in a way that would succeed and would restore our unity and happiness?
Anti-intellectualism, as this theory is known, has been weaving its way through discourse in society for quite a few years now. And what is this anti-intellectualism? It's a basic thought that my ignorance is superior to your knowledge. So don't disturb me with the knowledge that you have. The basic problem in religion is that its tenets, is that the basic framework, the fundamentals of religion are frozen. They're frozen in time. For Christianity, it is 2,000 years ago, in the period of Christ. For Islam, it may be 1,000 plus years ago. For Zoroastrianism, it is 4,000 years ago. And once the fundamentals are frozen, they ignore the progress of man. As man progresses, as his knowledge base increases, religion tends to ignore that. So you still have people wanting to go on horseback to get married. At that time, the idea of going on horseback is that the poor chap should not walk. But that thought is put to the side. He has to go on a horse in the middle of the road, whether it's Park Street or whether it's Theatre Road, and once I believe even on the flyover itself. Now, this does not make too much sense to me. Do we live in a world where we still believe the world should be flat? Because it was a belief that the world was flat. And when someone said no, it was round, he was roundly criticized for it. They wanted to stone Darwin and put him to death because he said man did not come from the Garden of Eden. Can you imagine? Are we to still believe that we came from the Garden of Eden? Or that we have actually progressed? One hopes the word progress is right, from apes. It is my feeling that these thoughts can best be solved by Zoroastrianism or the religion of Zarathustra. Because we have no diktats, we have no commandments. We are asked to use all our knowledge, whatever we have, to consider the facts with an open mind and come to our own conclusion, each and every one of us, and follow that conclusion with your conscience. That is the diktat that is given to us. So because of that, our religion is evergreen. For a Zoroastrian, not to use knowledge, not to use sense, not to use an unbiased mind, and not to come to a conclusion is the greatest sin of all. I have the greatest respect for you. If you have used your knowledge and have come to an opposite conclusion, that doesn't worry me. What bothers me is that you refuse to know, refuse to learn, and yet come to a conclusion and then hotly defend your conclusion without knowledge on the same basis that, oh, so-and-so told me, so that's fine. That to me is the worst crime you can commit in Zoroastrianism.
Mr. Dinsha Tamboli, President of the World Zoroastrian Association, has sent me a special message. I read it out to you. It was a revelation to read that so many of our present practices that we are told have been sacrosanct from time immemorial are different from those practiced earlier with the sanction of high priests and scholars of those times. The facts brought out so very dexterously by the author are likely to cause heartburn amongst those from within our community who believe that we are a pure and exclusive race. The author has certainly displayed courage in sifting fact from fiction.